Mike. Hi, my name is Katie Norton, and I'm a research manager at IDC, leading our DevSecOps and software supply chain security practice. The International Data Corporation is the premier global market intelligence data and events provider for the information technology, telecommunications, and consumer technology markets for nearly 60 years now. And with more than 5 billion data points and 1,300 analysts worldwide, in over 110 countries, IDC provides unmatched global, regional, and local expertise on technology and industry opportunities and trends. In fact, IDC has been recognized by the Institute of Influencer and Analyst Relations as the Analyst Firm of the Year for the last 5 years. So I want to start today by going through the agenda for my presentation. First, we're going to talk about the business of APIs and look at some data on API adoption and its revenue impact. Then, the growing API threat landscape, where we're going to look at some real-world breaches and security failures and some of the top application security threats. We'll pivot a little bit to talk about how AI is expanding the API attack surface, including some really great data on generative AI and AI agent adoption. Then we'll talk about trends in API security investment and what growing spend and key challenges organizations are facing. Then we'll talk about closing the security gaps, where we'll talk about scaling API security across the SDLC, and then jump into the case for consolidation and why organizations are looking to unify their API and web security tooling. Finally, we'll land on beyond the technology, organizational readiness, and we'll talk about the role culture, ownership, and processes play. And at the end, we'll present you with some key takeaways and next steps for you. So, in our latest research, which you see here on the screen, we've observed that APIs and web applications are becoming critical revenue drivers, accounting for an average of 26% of an organization's income. What's really compelling here is the emphasis among smaller and mid-sized organizations, those with under 1,000 employees. Within this group, nearly a quarter reported that more than 40% of their revenue comes from their web apps and APIs. This suggests that for many businesses, particularly those looking to scale, digital channels are no longer just supportive tools. They're central to growth strategies and core operations. On top of that, 54% of organizations say they are currently developing APIs, indicating that the API-driven innovation has well and truly gone mainstream. This broad adoption highlights the role of APIs and as the connective tissue of the modern ecosystem, enabling everything from streamlined customer experiences to agile partnerships. As more companies realize the potential of exposing data and the functionality through APIs, they're finding ways to speed up product development, improve process efficiency, and ultimately delivering more value to customers. It's clear that APIs aren't just a technical consideration, they're a strategic imperative that's shaping the future of how business is done. So we've seen how APIs become essential for business success, driving revenue, accelerating innovation, and enabling seamless digital experiences. But with this rapid adoption comes a growing challenge: securing them. As organizations scale their API usage, the attack surface expands, creating new opportunities for cyber criminals to exploit their vulnerabilities. To put this into perspective, let's look at 3 recent real-world breaches where APIs were the entry point for attackers. These incidents highlight the different ways APIs can be misused, whether through insecure endpoints, lack of authentication, or abuse of legitimate functionality. Each of these cases serves as a reminder that API security isn't just a technical issue, it's a business imperative. So in the first example, Dell recently experienced a major data breach in which attackers exploited an insecure API on the company's partner portal to create fraudulent accounts, ultimately exposing 49 million customer records. This incident underlines the ease at which improperly secured APIs can be weaponized to access sensitive information on a massive scale. The context of overall API security, it's really a stark reminder that organizations need robust authentication, rate limiting, and continuous anomaly detection, especially for partner and customer-facing endpoints. to be able to prevent similar large-scale compromises. A popular family safety app, Life 360, had an incident where they exposed over 400,000 user phone numbers through an unsecured Android API endpoint. The API lacked basic protections, allowing unauthorized parties to access sensitive information without authentication. This breach underscores how easily critical data can be compromised when APIs aren't properly secured and validated. As businesses continue to rely on APIs for core functionality, it's crucial to implement strict access controls, authentication, and monitoring to prevent similar incidents and protect customer data. And finally, attackers abused DocuSign's Envelopes API to send highly convincing fake invoices from legitimate DocuSign email addresses. Because the emails originated from a trusted source, they bypassed many spam filters and appeared credible to recipients, increasing the likelihood of clicks and potential credential theft. This event is a prime example of how attackers can exploit legitimate APIs to deliver malicious content, highlighting the critical need for robust API security controls and vigilant monitoring to detect and block unusual activity, even when it appears to come from a trusted source. So we've just talked through and walked through some real-world examples, right, of API breaches at major organizations that illustrate how attackers are actively exploiting API weaknesses to access sensitive data. So let's take a look and take a step back at the broader industry trends in application security threats as it relates to APIs. According to our research at IDC, data theft and leakage was the most commonly observed threat in 2023, affecting 33% of organizations. This aligns with what we've seen in breaches like Dell's, where attackers leveraged APIs to extract massive amounts of customer data. Right behind that, we see trends with API and web-specific threats, affecting 27% of organizations, and API exploits impacting 23% of organizations. This is significant because it highlights that API security is becoming just as critical as traditional web security. APIs, while essential for modern digital business, expand the attack surface in ways that legacy web defenses weren't built to handle. And as we saw in breaches like Life 360 and DocuSign, API vulnerabilities can be exploited for unauthorized access, data exposure, and even large-scale phishing campaigns. And one thing that's really impacting the need to secure APIs is the use of AI. Generative AI is no longer a niche experiment. It's becoming a really fundamental part of an enterprise's strategy. IDC research shows that only 4% of organizations are not engaging with generative AI at all. That means 96% are actively investing, deploying, or deeply embedding it into their operations. In fact, 38% have already introduced Gen AI into production, while another 33% plan to launch within the next year. Additionally, 25% are fully committed to integrating Gen AI across their organization. This data makes one thing clear: AI is not a future consideration. It's here, and it's transforming how businesses operate today. And at the heart of this transformation are APIs. Generative AI applications rely on APIs to access language models, retrieve and process data, and integrate AI-driven functionality into enterprise workflows. Whether it's powering chatbots, automating the content generation, or enabling real-time decision-making, APIs serve as the connective layer between AI models and the applications that use them. As organizations scale their use of Gen AI, the numbers of API calls are increasing exponentially, introducing higher levels of dependency on API reliability, performance, and security. APIs are no longer just supporting AI. They are the foundation that makes these systems work, allowing AI to seamlessly interact with users and other applications and data sources all across the organization. And beyond generative AI, we need to consider the rise of AI agents, autonomous systems that interact with APIs on behalf of users. These agents don't just use APIs the way traditional applications do. They actively seek out, integrate, and interact with them in real time, sometimes in ways developers don't anticipate. The second data point here shows that 24% of organizations expect agentic AI to have a significant impact in the next 18 months, while 36% anticipate a moderate impact. This means we're looking at a future where APIs are no longer just serving human users, but also API-driven entities that can interact across ecosystems. This shift demands a new approach to API security. Organizations have to shift and ensure that APIs are discoverable and manageable on their own terms, not just from a developer's perspective. Because we have to consider that AI agents might find them and use them. Implementing strong authentication, monitoring abnormal traffic patterns, and enforcing robust authorization policies are going to be critical as AI-driven automation becomes mainstream. Ultimately, the convergence of AI and APIs is not just an opportunity for innovation, it's really a wake-up call for security teams to prepare for a more dynamic and automated attack landscape. So as we've seen throughout the talk today, APIs are at the center of the modern application development process, but they're also presenting one of the most significant security challenges. The good news is that organizations, from our research at IDC are recognizing this and prioritizing API security at a high level. If you look at the first data point on the screen, API security ranks as the top security investment, with almost 40% of organizations identifying it as a key focus area, placing it above traditional areas like risk and compliance, cloud security posture management, and web application firewalls. This reflects a broader understanding that APIs are a primary attack vector and are requiring dedicated security solutions. A second data point reinforces this trend. 73% of organizations currently use API security tools, with another 15% planning to adopt them within the next 24 months. This means that nearly 9 out of 10 organizations will have API security solutions in place in the near future. However, 12% still have no plans to implement API security, which presents a real concern given the growing attack surface APIs introduce. This widespread adoption highlights a shift in security priorities. Organizations are moving beyond traditional perimeter defenses, and they're recognizing that API security requires dedicated solutions. But it also raises an important concern. Are these solutions truly comprehensive, or are there still gaps in protection? And we've seen that API security, it's a top priority, with already 73%, indicating they're using these tools, but the reality is that these solutions aren't being scaled across the entire API estate. Many organizations are only securing a portion of their APIs, leaving really critical gaps in protection. So if you look at the data I have here, over half of organizations secure less than 50% of their APIs, meaning that a significant number of APIs remain unprotected. This isn't due to a lack of awareness or investment, as we saw from the previous data. It's because organizations are facing key challenges that prevent them from expanding their API security coverage. The biggest issue, as you'll see in the second data point on the screen, cited by 49% of organizations, is that advanced threats are bypassing protections built into API gateways and integration platforms. What this suggests to me is that a lot of companies are relying on default security controls that simply aren't enough to stop sophisticated attacks. Another 41% struggle with the deployment challenges, indicating that rolling out API security at scale is too complex or disruptive. Additionally, 39% say traditional security tools like a WAF that they don't address API risks, and 30% feel that even purpose-built API security tools have gaps. So this is showing that while organizations are investing in these solutions, they may not be getting the level of protection they expected. So beyond technology, there's also some operational issues at play here. 28% indicated a lack of complete inventory of their APIs, and another 23% cite unclear ownership of API security responsibilities. So without knowing what APIs exist and who is accountable for securing them, achieving that full coverage is nearly impossible. So the key takeaway here from all this data is that while organizations are prioritizing API security, scaling it across all APIs remains a challenge due to tooling limitations, deployment complexity, and a lack of visibility and ownership. So One of the biggest challenges we see as it relates to this is that API security isn't just a single step. It needs to be embedded throughout the entire software development lifecycle. This lifecycle approach ensures that security isn't just bolted on after deployment, but is woven into every phase from design to runtime. So if you look here at this DevSecOps lifecycle, we can see that each stage plays a role in securing APIs, and different security measures are needed at different points. So for instance, in the design phase, this is where we sort of see security needing to start. Implementing threat modeling and defining secure API design specifications can ensure that security is built into APIs from the ground up, and that can reduce vulnerabilities before a single line of code is written. One of the best ways to achieve this is by leveraging the Open API specification. This Open API specification provides standardized formats for defining API endpoints, authentication requirements, and data structures, and its expected behaviors. So if you enforce API security requirements at this stage, teams can proactively reduce risks before APIs even reach production. Security teams can also use these Open API specifications to automate security reviews, enforce policies, and integrate security checks into the CI/CD pipeline. We also see the need to integrate API security into the coding and testing phases. Security has to be embedded in development with static analysis to identify risks early. One of the most effective ways to validate API security before deployment is through dynamic application security testing, or DAST. Unlike static analysis, which only looks at the code, DAST interacts with the running API just like an attacker would, and it probes it for vulnerabilities in authentication, authorization, input validation, and business logic. This is particularly critical for identifying vulnerabilities listed in the OWASP API Security Top 10. Many of these risks are difficult to detect in static testing alone because they only emerge when an API is actively running. Another key area in which we see API security implemented is in the monitoring and protection in runtime. Security doesn't stop at deployment. API solutions need to continuously monitor, provide protection at runtime, and also provide API discovery to help identify new threats, track API usage, and prevent attacks that bypass those traditional defenses. What I'm sort of getting at here is that this layered security approach is critical because different threats emerge at different points in the lifecycle. If API security is only applied at one stage, gaps will remain, leaving APIs vulnerable to attack. So by implementing security across every stage of the SDLC, organizations can ensure that APIs remain secure by design, resilient in deployment, and continuously protected in production. So we've sort of just discussed this importance of a layered security approach throughout the SDLC, right? However, as organizations implement these security layers, many are now realizing that managing multiple disjointed security tools across different phases and teams creates complexity, inefficiency, and coverage gaps. And this is where consolidation comes into play. If you're looking at the first data point on here, IDC research found that 86% of organizations are interested in consolidating their API security solutions, with 51% being very interested. This shows that organizations aren't just looking for more security tools. They want fewer, more effective solutions that integrate seamlessly across their environments. Why is this such a priority? The second data point provides insight into the key drivers behind this trend. Organizations want greater protection against a variety of threats and advanced attacks, which often require multiple security functions working together. Improving threat detection and accuracy and reducing false positives is another major factor. Many security teams struggle with fragmented tools that generate too many alerts without any clear context. Additionally, faster time to detection and mitigation is critical for proactively stopping API-based attacks before they cause harm. Beyond security, consolidation significantly improves operational efficiency and time savings, which is a growing priority for organizations. 29% of respondents to the survey cited a reduced time and effort for implementation and management as a key benefit of consolidation. A unified solution eliminates redundant configurations, it streamlines workflows, and it accelerates incident response by reducing the number of security tools teams need to manage. Instead of juggling multiple platforms with different policies, alerts, and interfaces, teams can work together within a single cohesive environment, saving time on both setup and the day-to-day operations. So the key takeaway here is that organizations don't just need standalone API security. They need solutions that unify API security and web application security. Many API-driven attacks originate from web traffic and securing APIs in isolation, leaving gaps that attackers can exploit through traditional web vulnerabilities. By consolidating API and web security into a single integrated solution, organizations can reduce security blind spots, simplify policy enforcement, and they can significantly cut down the time required for secure applications. Ultimately, security leaders are looking for fewer, smarter, and more efficient solutions that reduce complexity, improve protection, and save time across both APIs and web applications. So as we move forward here, I'm going to explore a little bit about how organizations can achieve this level of consolidation without sacrificing depth or flexibility in their security approach. A truly effective security solution depends on organizational alignment and cultural adoption. If security isn't integrated into how teams work, even the best tools will fail to deliver their full value. So let's look at 3 key areas that organizations need to address to make security consolidation successful. The first is one of the biggest challenges that organizations face with API security is that of responsibility, and it's often scattered across most teams. Developers build APIs, DevOps deploys them, compliance teams ensures their regulatory adherence, and security teams are trying to protect them. If there's no clear ownership, APIs can be released without proper security oversight, leading to gaps that attackers can exploit. To address this, organizations must break down silos and establish joint accountability between development, security, and operations teams. This means embedding security into DevSecOps workflows, where security isn't a separate function, but is integrated as part of the development process. So security must be a shared responsibility, not an afterthought. And even with the right tools and processes, security is ultimately about people. And many of the most common API vulnerabilities, like broken object level authorization, that results a lot of times from design and access control mistakes, not just technical flaws. And that's why another important factor here is ongoing education and training. Organizations should invest in developer security awareness programs, tabletop exercises, and real-world attack simulations to help teams understand how API threats work and how to prevent them. Another key factor is ensuring that security solutions don't create friction for developers. If security is seen as a roadblock, teams may look away or look for ways to bypass it. And that's why these consolidated security solutions really need to ensure that they're integrating seamlessly into things like CI/CD pipelines and developer workflows. For example, security tools should provide real-time feedback during development, catching misconfigurations and vulnerabilities early. And I want to kind of dive in on this third one just a little bit with some data I have from my last DevSecOps survey and talk about the importance of organizational and cultural alignment around developers and as it relates to web applications and APIs. With strong leadership buy-in and process alignment, it can get you pretty far, but security can't be effective without developer adoption. If you look at the data here, we saw that 74% of organizations considered developer acceptance of security tools to be one of the most important or very important requirements when it came to selecting a DevSecOps tool. This reinforces a key reality. Security solutions have to work for developers, not against them. If security tools disrupt workflows, slow down development, or create excessive noise, developers will resist using them and ultimately leave applications, including APIs, exposed. We also see that time constraints and slow security processes are key concerns. This is where API security in particular faces a lot of challenges. APIs are built for speed and interconnectivity, but if security testing slows down development or generates excessive false positives, developers may bypass security measures or just outright ignore findings. The solution here isn't just better security, it's security that integrates seamlessly into existing developer workflows without adding friction. Another key takeaway here is that 7.5% of respondents cited just a lack of access to security tools as a major barrier. This suggests that even when security solutions exist, they may not be accessible to or designed for developers. API security tools need to be developer-friendly, providing actionable insights with clear remediation guidance rather than just surfacing risks without context. So as we move forward to a more consolidated approach to web and API security, it's not just about choosing the right tools. It's about ensuring that these tools are embraced by the teams that use them every single day. Security teams must work closely with developers to reduce complexity, automate security controls, and provide in-context education to bridge those skills gaps that we see. Ultimately, the key to securing APIs isn't just stronger policies or more scanning. It's a security-first culture where developers are empowered with the right tools, the right training, and the right workflows to more actively secure APIs without slowing down that innovation that's so important. So some key takeaways here to wrap up around, strengthening API security at scale. We've covered a lot of ground, from the growing role of APIs in modern business to evolving threats they face and the challenges of securing APIs at scale. To wrap up, I want to leave you with 4 key takeaways, practical steps you can take to strengthen your API security across your organization. The number one thing, and this is probably said across the board when we talk about security, you can't secure what you can't see. You need to begin with an inventory. The foundation of any security strategy is visibility, and if you don't have a clear understanding of all the APIs in your environment, whether they're internal, external, or third party, you're going to leave gaps that attackers can exploit. Start with a comprehensive API inventory to uncover shadow APIs, deprecated endpoints, and unauthorized access points. Then, determine where in the SDLC you have API controls and where you need them. Security needs to be built into the API lifecycle, not just applied as an afterthought. Take stock of where security controls currently exist in your design, coding, testing, deployment, and runtime processes. Identify gaps where vulnerabilities could slip through and work towards a layered approach that ensures security is integrated at every stage. Third, look for integrated solutions that address multiple needs. One of the biggest challenges organizations face is tool sprawl, and too many disconnected security solutions add complexity instead of reducing risk. Instead of managing separate tools for API security, web application security, and threat detection, look for consolidated solutions that offer comprehensive protection across your API and web environments. And then finally, evaluate your API security culture and make it a priority. Technology alone isn't enough. People and processes matter just as much. Security must be a shared responsibility across teams, not just something that the security team worries about. Encourage collaboration between developers and security teams, integrate security into DevOps workflows, and invest in ongoing API security training. The more security is ingrained in your culture, the less risk you'll face down the road. So finally, to conclude, API security is not just about technology, it's about protecting the business. Take these steps now, and it will help your organizations reduce risk, improve resilience, and continue to innovate safely. By prioritizing things like visibility, lifecycle security, consolidation, and a really strong security culture, you'll be well positioned to stay ahead of evolving threats while enabling growth. Thank you so much for your time today, and I hope you are walking away with valuable insights you can bring back to your organizations to enhance your API security strategy. If you have any questions or want to continue the conversation or need further insights, feel free to reach out. My contact information is here, and I'd be happy to connect.